Dr. Lorenzo T. Neal is a native of Monroe, Louisiana, and current pastor of the New Bethel African Methodist Episcopal Church in Jackson, Mississippi. In preaching ministry for nearly 30 years, Dr. Neal has overcome many challenges, including the tragic death of his mother in 1980 to gun violence. He accepted his call to preach at the age of 12. He was licensed to preach at the age of 16. He was ordained to the ministry at the age of 20 and served as youth pastor and pastor of worship. Since 2001, he was ordained and served as pastor in several churches. Dr. Neal has a BS in music education with a minor in English journalism. He also holds a Master Divinity, a Master of Liberal Studies, Music Composition, Theory and Rhetoric, and a Master of Education in Leadership and Supervision. He is the humble host of Zera Today Radio Show, Be Your Differentiated Self podcast on Spotify, author of several published articles and 2 books. Dr. Neal serves as Dean of Ministerial Training and South Action Chair for the South Mississippi Conference of the 8th Episcopal District. He is involved in a number of community and professional organizations, including the American Psychologist Association, Clergy for Prison Reform, Douglas Leadership Institute, Frederick Douglass Foundation of Mississippi, Intentional Insights Pro-Truth Pledge, founding signer of the Prayer and Action Petition, and senior fellow with the Everytown Survivor Network. Let's welcome him. Dr. Lorenzo T. Neal is a native of Monroe, Louisiana, and current pastor of the New Bethel African Methodist Episcopal Church in Jackson, Mississippi, in preaching ministry for Neal. Welcome back, Grief Nation listeners, and today on our show I have a very special guest with us, and his name is Dr. Lorenzo Neal. I first met Dr. Neal as a fellow at our meeting in Miami. He is also an author, a coach, pastor, and gun violence survivor and prevention advocate. Hello, Dr. Neal. How are you?
Hi, Miami. I'm well, and it's good to see you again.
Absolutely. Always a pleasure sharing space with you. Can you tell us about your journey of being a homicide survivor as well as a survivor of violent crimes?
Yes. When it comes to homicide, I have lost 4 people in particular. I lost my 25-year-old mother, who was killed in the act of domestic violence at the age of 25 in 1980. And that act of domestic violence involved a gun. She had 4 boys, of which I am one. And then in 2010, I lost one of my brothers, one of her sons, to he was stabbed to death. And I think he was 33. I had to preach his funeral. And in 2008, I lost one of my students. I was teaching. I was a band director in middle school, and lost one of my little saxophone players to an act of gun violence where he and his friend were playing around with guns and was accidentally shot by his friends, one of my other students. And in 2016, I lost my 18-year-old nephew, Kevin Neal Jr., to a senseless act of gun violence.
Oh, I'm so sorry for that happening to you. Can you just share with us how, being a survivor of all of that, how have you adapted to so much trauma behind the losses?
Well, I didn't really experience trauma after my mother's death, even though we were young. I was 5 years old when my mother was killed.
Okay.
And we were raised by her parents, my grandparents. So they gave us the environment of love and nurture so much as we didn't have the effects of trauma. Now, we were traumatized, but we didn't have any overt symptoms of traumatic emotional damage or anything like that. So we grew up pretty normal. And of course, I guess we acted out as normal children, but nothing outside of the ordinary with that.
Yeah.
It wasn't until the loss of my student, my brother, and my nephew that I really, because I was older and I really began to understand the trauma that follows tragedy of any kind. And with the loss of my nephew and my former student, the biggest thing is their age. And because I was a teacher and I was a pastor, I had to serve as a grief counselor for the students, because we were, at the time when the student was killed, we were doing testing, and he had just come into my office and was joking. And I said, okay, we're getting out of school early because we're testing. I'll see you at band practice at 3:00. He never made that band practice.
Wow.
And I had to deal with the students, their reaction to that. We did a wonderful tribute as a band at his funeral. The band played at his funeral. When my nephew, the biggest issue I had to deal with was, again, the fact that he died young. He had a whole lot of potential ahead of him. And I grieved the fact that his life was taken, because I couldn't comprehend that. Like I thought, I thought I'd be able to understand it and come to terms with the fact that, yeah, like the old folks say, God wanted him more. I didn't like that.
Yeah.
That saying. It took me a while to deal with that, the trauma of losing him, and to see his parents go through that grief. That's probably, it wasn't so much as me, it was more the trauma of what they were experiencing that I kind of brought myself into.
Yeah. And because you have been in ministry over 30 years, and also because there is so much complexity surrounding religion and spirituality when someone loses a loved one, can you kind of dive into that, as with your expertise of being a minister and just being, like you said, you've been in ministry for over 30 years. How have you been able to help others through that process, even though, like you said, you were having to grieve on the outsides, watching your brother or sister? Was it your brother or your sister's child, or was it?
It was my brother. I don't have any.
Okay.
Not biological.
You said 4 boys. That's right. I apologize. But you said, so how was that for you, and just being in ministry to help them through this process?
Well, religion, and particularly the Christian faith, for many Blacks and many people, but for my experience as, African American, the church serves as the foundation for the sense of being, the sense of belonging, and the sense of living.
Yeah.
And having been in ministry, I get asked the question all the time: did I go into ministry because of my mother's loss? I'm like, no. I didn't think about it. I was 12 years old when I announced my call to preach, and my mother's death still, she was dead. That didn't really factor into the accepting my call. My father's ministry, and that was the other thing was there some pressure from him to, I'm like, no, I was raised by my grandparents. There was no influence on him. And so entering in ministry, I didn't enter in ministry because of anything bad, anything traumatic. It was just an overwhelming sense of a call of God. And the old folk in my community, they used to say, he's going to be a preacher. And, they could see it. They could see it. So I was no drugs, I was the perfect kid, if you ask me.
Of course.
I was the good boy. So there was no traumatic response to trauma that led me into ministry. And there is, for a lot of people, trauma leads them to a greater sense of faith, greater sense of the idea of needing to be part of the collective body of supportive members of either a faith community or just any others, even for non-believers. It's the same. It's that idea of the connected humanity and the connected experience of humanity that reinforces the idea of belonging.
Yeah.
So for a lot of people who experience trauma, particularly when it comes to gun violence, while they may turn away from the church or the faith community or any sense of religious identity for a moment, that's just part of the process from my perspective,
Yeah.
And when it comes to death, I've been this way for now. I've been taking this approach now for a long time. If you have to push pause on your religious experience, interface and interactions to deal with the trauma that comes with loss, and that's just not with gun violence, but any loss, of any kind, do it. And it's not going to, I know this sounds crazy coming from a pastor, but it's not going to hurt the church.
Right.
If you spend time to get yourself together so that you can better articulate your faith once you come through this moment of grieving. And for me, that's the biggest thing, as a pastor, I want you to grow and mature in faith.
Yes.
I don't want your trauma affecting your faith. Mm-hmm. You can't be an effective witness or a disciple of Christ when you're overwhelmed by the burden of what you experience in traumatic loss. And I think that's the downside of church, because we condition people so quickly that once the funeral is over, you're supposed to be good.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You do the funeral, you go to the repast, you eat the good food, you shake everybody's hand, and that's supposed to be it. You're supposed to be ready to go on. But for a lot of people, that isn't the case. I had to preach my brother's funeral. I had to preach my nephew's funeral. And neither one of those were good for me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Particularly after my brother's funeral, even though everyone complimented me on the eulogy, I was majorly depressed after that.
Yeah.
When it came to my nephew's funeral, going into that space of knowing that I had to, I was like, oh my God, I can't do it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I did it. It was well received. And because of his age, the young people were there. Hundreds of young people were there. Mm-hmm. And they responded well to the eulogy.
Mm-hmm.
And I left that place feeling more empty, even though I knew what I had done. I knew he would have been smiling cheek to cheek and all of that. I knew he probably, even if he were alive, if it wasn't his funeral, he probably would come out to me and had some nice jokes, because he was a little jokester. And I had to continue in pastoral ministry, and that was probably one of the most challenging moments. Mm-hmm. And I even had one person tell me, okay, it's been this long, Pastor, you should be over it.
Oh, wow. I hate that.
And now this is a member telling me this. And I'm like, if it was that easy, I'd be fine. But it's not that easy. And now anytime I read of anybody, but more particularly young Black men, anytime I read of them losing their life to gun violence, it's like that trauma from my nephew is re-experienced. And even though I have to preach Sunday after Sunday, I still have to get my mind together and say, yes, I can do it. And this is a part of both my spiritual identity and my trauma identity.
Yeah. Thank you so much for being so vulnerable and talking about that, because that's real. And that's what the people need to hear, because so many times with my experience in being a part of the gun violence prevention movement, we run across so many different types of the loss. Even though it was through gun violence, we even just, of course, we have victims that were victimized. So trying to have those conversations even with them to help them continue on and process through as we do the work that we do. Having you a part of Moms is just a gift to us, because we all need someone with guidance of to help us through our faith. And even though, we all bounce back and forth, with me even being a grief specialist, doesn't mean that I don't grieve, or I had to just really take a break coming off of our leadership conference, just because, the talks about it and the constant stories and we kind of hold on to that stuff, but we have to have an outlet and a way to be able to remove those thoughts, or because a lot of times we carry other people's stuff. We hold on to it because people look to us, especially I'm sure in your position as a pastor, and just the work that you do as far as being teaching at the school and everything. So you have all this weight of others on you. So can you please share with me some of the things that you do to be able to self-care and just be able to support yourself and others?
I knew that was coming. Unfortunately, I am still learning self-care. As a pastor, we were conditioned, or I was conditioned, because I was a kid when I began ministry and going into young adulthood, I was conditioned that I'm supposed to be tough.
Yeah.
And, I'm supposed to be able to bear the burdens of everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And caring for self means that you are not truly called, or not truly, faithful, or not
Mm-hmm.
truly a minister. So when it came to self-care, I didn't do much.
Mm-hmm.
And I because I always felt guilty for looking after myself.
Wow.
And it was the same after all the deaths that I experienced, with the exception of my mother, because I didn't know any better.
Mm-hmm.
And self-care was provided for me.
Yeah.
But after in my adulthood, after the loss of my brother and my nephew and the student, after their loss, I took a moment. I took a moment briefly to kind of regroup. I didn't travel. I didn't give myself vacations or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
But I, kind of hide away for a day and escape into reading a book, or escape playing my instrument or something. Now I've gotten to the point of valuing self-care, one, because I'm older.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I want to live a little longer.
Right.
But I realized that I can't give quality care
Mm-hmm.
to others if I do not give quality care to myself.
Yeah.
So now, I walk every day.
Mm-hmm.
I got my little dude, my dog. He walks me. I don't walk. He walks me.
Right.
He takes me on his walk. And of course, there's the physical exercise that I'm getting back to.
Mm-hmm.
But it's been small things like purchasing a coloring book.
Yeah.
And color, literally going to Walmart, buying the markers and the colors, and then trying to figure out which color I'm going to use to this, and seeing the completed piece. I never, and this was especially this year since this pandemic, I've gone through 2 coloring books.
Uh-huh.
But I was so proud of about 2 or 3 of them. I had to post them on the ground. That's how proud I was.
Yeah.
Coloring.
Yeah. Coloring teaches us structure. That's one of the, not a tactic, but one of the healing methods that I've learned too. Using coloring books kind of helps us stay within the confinement of the lines when we may be feeling all over the place. So,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But it also helped me because, one, not only did it help, I made ADHD.
Mm-hmm.
So it helped me focus.
Yeah, absolutely.
Stay on task. But I saw the healing. I felt the healing property just being able to start and complete it.
Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And that kind of is a segue to go right into, you're also an author. Can you please share with us the works that you've done and how can we find them?
The two books that I've written, one is called A Breach in the Family, and it details, it was actually based off the sermon eulogy for my brother's funeral. And it talks about the aftermath of trauma and grieving and the silence, particularly that happens in a lot of families after the loss of someone, if it's to a violent crime in particular.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that when my mother was killed, for decades, the family just didn't talk about the means of her death.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we weren't fully informed of how she died. We knew she was, shot,
Mm-hmm.
but the totality of the events leading to her death, we were not informed of. And I was well into my adulthood before my family, her siblings, actually told me what was leading up to that, what led up to her death.
Wow.
And I wrote about that, the silence of a breach in the family that does more damage
Mm-hmm.
than healing. A lot of families, when it comes to traumatic loss and violent deaths, they're like, well, if we don't talk about it as much,
Mm-hmm.
it may make the grief less,
Yeah.
and it may make the trauma or the emotions less easier to deal with. And in many cases, many families, that's not the case.
Mm-hmm.
So it's Breaching the Family. The other one is it's called Reflections from the Pastor Study, and basically in the Black church tradition or any church tradition, you have the program, the bulletins,
Mm-hmm.
and weekly I would write reflections. Most of them didn't have anything to do with my sermon for that
Mm-hmm.
week, and so it's a collection of that. That's the second book. But I've written numerous articles, both academic and in other uh, other areas that I've published. I kept a
Wow.
blog too, and I've written about that.
Just so
So that
talented.
it just seems like it.
Just a gifted talent. That's
Yeah.
that's who you are. So let's also talk about your advocacy work and that you've committed your life to. Share all those experiences with us, and when you join moms and becoming a fellow.
Yeah. So before I joined Moms, in 2000 I started a foundation, a nonprofit foundation called the Roses of Sharon to honor my mother, and that was my first venue into advocacy, and it was the first of its kind mentoring organization in Arkansas where I was at the time, and I saw a need for this. It was mentoring. The idea of mentoring was still very new, and I saw a need for that in the community where I served and pastored. And so we started this foundation to empower kids. We matched them up with adult mentors, and we trained both of them, the adult and the mentee, on how to be effective citizens. And we dealt with grieving and trauma and all of that even then, because a lot of kids had that exposure. So we dealt with that. And it wasn't until 2015, after the shooting in Charleston, South Carolina, at a Mother Emanuel, that I really got involved with the gun violence prevention movement.
Uh-huh.
And that's only because, again, I was pastor.
Mm-hmm.
And Reverend Pinckney was an acquaintance of mine, because through the church, we both pastored in the AME church. My bishop was his mentor, and that was our connection. And we were going to be seeing each other, supposed to see each other 2 weeks following the shooting, but that didn't happen. And Lucy McBath, now Congresswoman Lucy McBath came to one of our meetings and spoke as from her perspective of losing her son and how she had gotten involved with moms with our missionary society. And from that, that organization said, hey, this is going to be our thing. And of course, being a good pastor, like, all right, sure, no problem. So we had a local meeting, and we had a couple from, I want to say they're from Maryland, but they were survivor fellows. And they came and shared their story. And I was like, okay. And they told that they were survivors. And I'm like, okay. And that's when I identified as a survivor of gun violence after my mom and my student. So, but still, I'm only doing this because I'm a pastor, and this is the AME thing that happened at the AME church. So
yeah,
that's the only reason I got involved.
okay.
In 2016, there was some gun legislation I didn't agree with in the Mississippi State Legislature. So I started advocating against those particular gun bills by myself.
Okay.
And so I guess Everytown caught wind of it, and they came in and trained us for Advocacy Day, and that was my first time speaking out as a survivor of gun violence, being recognized as a survivor. And Lucy McBath was there, and she's like, Pastor, nope, you're not going to be quiet. You're going to talk. You're going to speak. We're going to make sure of it. And I got involved in the Survivor Network. Eventually became a Survivor Fellow and honed my story better.
Absolutely.
And then by the time I lost my nephew in 2016, I was advocating already, working with moms. I was sharing my story across Mississippi, wherever I could share it. And I did want to add another story, but unfortunately, I had to add another story that included my nephew. But now I use both of their voices, all the voices, as a means of empowerment, because I want people to see that out of the hundreds of people who are killed every day in gun violence, there's a family that's affected by it. There are friends that's affected by it. And there's an entire community that's affected and impacted by it. And while the media focuses on the mass shootings, and we all should be concerned about that, but the hundreds of shootings that happen daily that don't go reported, that may make a 10-second bleep on the evening news, they'll show the face of the person who killed and give their little bio, and that's it. It's my job and my responsibility now to say, hey, there's not just a face behind that. There's a story behind that.
Absolutely. And loved ones that are left behind,
and loved
as
ones.
you stated. Yes, absolutely. So that is going to bring us right into, you've talked about your mother's, the foundation, which is the 2,000 Rows of Sharon Foundation. How can the community support you in those efforts?
Well, that foundation is, unfortunately, we had to dissolve it.
Okay.
But by me being a pastor now, the way I engage the community is to help them see here in our local community, where in Mississippi, where I live, we now had gun violence heightened as across the country.
Absolutely.
During these last several months of the pandemic. And my goal now and my advocacy now is to empower these community members to speak up and speak out.
Absolutely.
And to say, look, if you know someone has a gun and they have it illegally, and they shouldn't have access to it, report it.
Absolutely.
Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to say, look, we know this person should not have access to a weapon, and they do. That report it.
Yeah.
And because you can prevent a lot of the gun violence that's happening if you could be just more proactive. And that's where I am now. I'm trying to get my voice to be more proactive, get my community to be more proactive in preventing gun violence and not reactive, because I was involved in several rallies. He wants attention. He wants to sit in the windowsill. That's what he's trying to do. I was involved in several Stop the Violence rallies, and there will only be maybe a dozen or 2 dozen people there at these rallies, and we're trying to address gun violence. And not to knock any other movement, but Black Lives Matter or anything like that, we see hundreds or even thousands come out, and I'm like, that's great.
Yeah.
But it's the local movement. We got to start here first, and we need to be advocates for life, abundant life altogether.
Absolutely. I was just gonna ask you that, just being a Black man in America now, and from the thoughts of what has transpired, as you stated, over the last couple of months with Ahmaud Arbery and Breonna Taylor and George Floyd, what are still some of your feelings surrounding that?
It grieves me. I mean, every time I think about those names right now, but I can think of countless others that
Absolutely.
don't make media. I've heard dozens just this year in some rural areas that never will make the news.
Yeah.
It grieves me because I know what it's like. I've been driving while Black in high school. I shared this story. I was frisked by an officer who said I fit the profile of someone who had committed a crime. And mind you, I have these big glasses. I wore blue because blue was just my color. That's what I wore. And this was during the time of the Blood Crip thing. I wore blue. I had a trombone case and a big backpack.
Right.
And how could I fit the description? I'm walking from school.
Yeah.
And this officer literally, frisked me down as if I was a criminal. And I'm like,
Wow.
I know what it's like to be profiled going into the store. I went into the store one time, this upscale store, and the clerk just followed me around. And so what did I do? I bought the most expensive thing I could afford in there. And then I also know what it's like to have that fear of being pulled over. Just recently, I got pulled over by police. I was so tense. I was afraid.
Yeah.
I wasn't sure, not because you just don't know.
Yeah.
And the officer was kind and courteous, and I didn't get a ticket or anything. I've forgotten what he pulled me over for, but it's moments like that that reinforce this idea of what it's like to be a Black man in this country. Even in the midst of all the liberties and we have, there's still this sense that anything can happen to us. And mind you, I'm also conservative, so where many of these conservatives are saying back the blue and all that, I'm like, look, no, love the individual first.
Yeah.
And I hate when they bring up the criminal backgrounds or any type of negative narrative that they can find about a person who has been done unjust by a system that was supposed to be created to help them, serve them, protect them. And you find anything negative and that's what you're going to push, that grieves me.
Yeah.
It grieves me there's still no justice in it, no arrest for the officers who committed the crime against Breonna Taylor. It grieves me that the likelihood that the 3 men involved with Arbery, I hope the justice is right, but sometimes we get a little sometimes the justice system gets zealous,
Yeah.
and they just put on a better show. And they can say, well, we did our best. We saw that with Trayvon Martin. We did our best. But the zeal was just to say that we did something. And that's a concern of mine. And when it comes to the idea of Black Lives Matter, I believe Black Lives, I should believe it. We should advocate for it. But in the totality of it, and the totality of the Black lives is what we should present. And not just when it's at the hand of a less melanated person.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that. Now, you also have a radio show and podcast. Share what you do there.
Okay. So I've been doing the Zera Today Radio Show for the last 10 years, and we cover a breadth of topics, mostly social concerns and topics and issues and faith issues, church issues. I talk a lot about the Black church because that's my experience.
Yeah.
And talk a lot about social issues that are also a part of that community. And I've been doing that for the last 10 years. And I just launched a new podcast early this year called Be Your Differentiated Self. And that is based on my doctoral research in the area of family systems and differentiation of self. I find myself to be one of the few Black folk that decided to look into that and explore that and integrate it into not just my ministry and counseling, but also into organizational and interpersonal development. So,
what was your theory for that? Can you break that down a little bit more so I can understand?
Differentiation of self.
Yeah.
The differentiation of self is part of a 8-concept system developed by Dr. Murray Bowen, who has developed the family systems theory and model of counseling. And differentiation of self is probably the most popular concept out of those 8 concepts. And it basically is the idea that a person who is emotionally intelligent about themselves, they can have a more a better sense of interpersonal relations, the ability to be able to communicate their emotions and react more positively to negative interactions with. So if you and I had a fault, we had some words, the highly self-differentiated individual would take those words and instead of react negatively and go off on the handle or cut you off or block you or anything like that, is able to understand, the emotional self and respond in kind. So I used it in regards to ministry as an organization. The church as an organization, and how clergy can be better more emotionally intelligent, and in turn teach their members to be more emotionally intelligent.
Yeah. That sounds very interesting. So can you tell us, what is your call to action today?
In this moment, my call to action is to be prepared and be ready. Well, that's the same thing, just to vote. And I say that because every election is critical, but this is a critical election, particularly for those who have been impacted by gun violence. We did see a surge in persons purchasing guns for the first time. We've also seen a surge in gun violence across the spectrum of this country. And we've also seen how gun legislation, responsible, sensible, common sense gun legislation has helped when it comes to preventing gun violence. And so I would strongly encourage persons to be informed of candidates, and if you can, vote for those candidates who are gun sense minded. not just being a gun owner myself. I don't want somebody to say they're going to protect the Second Amendment. No, I want you to do a little bit more than that.
Yeah.
If you can create legislation to prevent the loopholes, if you can create legislation to ensure that persons who should not have guns, like felons or persons with severe mental deficiencies, those persons should not have access to weapons. The other thing is, I would say be smart. And this is probably one of my biggest things. Because I lost a student to gun violence, accidental shooting, and because I'm a gun owner, one of my things is I want people to make sure that they are smart. That is, make sure that if they have a weapon that is secure in their homes, their cars, wherever they are. Also, that they should model responsible guns behavior. So that if they have children, like I grew up around guns, I knew what to do. My grandfather taught us well.
Mm-hmm.
But they should also model that if they're going to go out for sports shooting,
Yeah.
model how it should be. And if they're going to have their children going over to houses, don't be afraid to ask if that person has a weapon in their house, if that weapon is secure, if that weapon not only secure, if it's loaded.
Yeah.
And if it's not secure, could they secure it before my child or I come over? Then recognize that in this day and age, in this pandemic, there's an increasing, unfortunate, a lot of people are using guns for suicide. And you got to recognize that. And with young Black Americans, young Black males, unfortunately, and young Black period, are unfortunately, suicide by gun is becoming almost the norm.
Mm-hmm.
And we need to be aware of that, and we need to be able to prevent that, talk to our children, talk to anyone about it. And the last thing is tell everybody else just to be smart. It's not just for kids. Be smart is a wonderful tool for kids, but for adults, for persons like myself who are gun owners, for persons who are not gun owners but know people who are gun owners and
Mm-hmm.
may know that they're not secure and all of that.
Yeah.
That's very critical.
It's a beautiful reminder of the things that we should do, like you have stated, by using the acronym of it. It's just a beautiful reminder of the things that we don't think about, because I did not think about at any point in time when I sent my children over to friends or family to even, ask about guns. But, through the research and, all of the amazing programs because of the prevention of gun violence, we are learning these things now, which is great, because I drill my daughter all the time because I have 3 grandchildren, and I drill her all the time. Where they're going? Have you asked about it? And it's like, what I found is people are kind of, that's a difficult conversation to have about somebody else's house. But I'd rather you have that difficult conversation than me hearing any news of, an unintentional shooting or, So it's just a good reminder of what we should do, as you stated.
Yeah. And again, I know we don't want to have those difficult conversations, but we have to.
Absolutely.
Especially in this day and age when children are home. Many are attending school virtually, but they still want that social interaction.
Yeah.
It's just more pertinent now than ever before.
Yeah, absolutely. So what's next for your journey?
As in the words of the old song, "Where he leads me, I will follow."
Okay.
I just, my whole purpose and in life is to empower others, to help others be liberated. If the Lord would have called me home today, I think I would be okay knowing that I've done something positive and empowering and liberating in this lifetime. But wherever the road takes me, because I never expected to be in this place now.
Yeah. Yeah.
wherever the road takes me.
Oh.
And I will always be a voice for the oppressed if they are there, and always be an advocate for humanity.
Absolutely. So can you just share how can others reach you? What are your social media platforms?
Okay, well, the best place to reach me is my website,
Okay.
LorenzoTneal.com. Go there, buy a book or two. You can listen to the podcast, the radio show, all on that platform, LorenzoTneal.com. I'm on Facebook. You can go to Dr. Lorenzo T. Neal. You find me there because my personal page is already full.
Yeah.
On the Instagram, it's Pastor Zoe75
Okay.
on Instagram. Don't ask me why. It's just,
It
I
is
saw
what it
people
is.
being creative with the name, so
So that's what it is, huh?
that's what it is. What it is, you know.
So can you oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, and on Twitter, I'm on Twitter at Lorenzo T. Neal on Twitter. So yeah, go follow. And I have a YouTube channel. It's Dr. Lorenzo Neal YouTube. I post sporadically. You know, I'm not a big YouTuber. I try to post every now and then. I need to put something up to make it look halfway recent.
Now, is your podcast, any of them, are they actual live video, or is just audio?
Mostly audio. I'm trying to get to the point where I can integrate the video.
Okay.
Be all sophisticated. I took a Skillshare class for that.
Okay. All right now. now, so are any of your podcasts located on your YouTube channel? Any of the segments of your podcast or radio show there?
Well, you can find. I've done a few radio
Okay.
shows on the YouTube, so you can go and listen to it. I don't know the quality of it because, like I said, I had a
YouTube
camera.
is such a great resource for, everything. So
Yeah.
I definitely love to make sure I promote you wherever you are. But majority of your information is stored, you're stating, on your website. Correct?
Yeah. You go to my website, LorenzoTneal.com, another plug.
Absolutely.
And there are pages that have all of those there.
Okay.
Yeah. Because I try to be humble.
Oh no! Look, the purpose of, let me tell you, and I try to get people to really understand this. When I bring on my featured guests, I want them to share all of the amazing things that they're doing, and I definitely want you to plug yourself, plug, because it is so imperative that we share, where we come from in that journey into where we are, and because a lot of times we don't know who may listen. At any given time, your words are so inspiring and encouraging, to the point that this may change that person's view of what their grief journey looks like and how they can do something differently. So I definitely want them to be able not only to receive from me, receive from my amazing guest that has been chosen to come on to the show to shed their light on how, they've moved through this process and became so resilient, and then found what their purpose is, out of this whole entire thing, because with just all of the, and I usually talk to individuals that have just lost one child or, a sibling or something, but you've had a lifetime of losing loved ones. And I think it is so imperative that people see you in the light that you're in after experiencing so many losses, and that you're still able, to move on and move through. So I'm grateful to share you as a resource and bring you back on at any given time if you're having something that you want me to promote.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
You're always welcome. Always welcome.
Appreciate it.
Can you leave us with any memories of your lost loved ones, and so that we can have that sense of imagery about how amazing they were?
Well, from what I gathered with my mom was 25 years old. She was LPN at a local hospital in my hometown, and also a waitress at the juke joint across the street from her parents' house. So that was fun. But she was the type of person who was outgoing as best she could, and I've been told I'm more like her than any of her other sons. I don't know how true that is, but she was warm, caring, and it's sad that she lost her life so young. Um, with my brother Emmanuel, the Lord rest his soul, that dude was a character there. That's all I can say. He was a character. Hard to be around. Also, when my student on trail, uh, he was only 14 when his life was taken by an act of gun violence, uh, accidental gun shooting. But you had to see him. He was starting to grow his little braids, and little dreads, and he was a fun little saxophone player. And the last memory I have, and the funniest memory I have, was him coming to the door of the band room saying, "Miss Neal, what's up?" I said, "It's up. School's gonna be out, but I better see you at practice at 3 o'clock." And he had to smile. And with my nephew, I don't know what all I can say about him. That kid, you just have to. He had big ears, big smile, and of course, every teenager is an aspiring rapper.
Mm-hmm.
So he was an aspiring rapper,
Uh-huh.
and sometimes I did not like
Uh-huh.
what he was rapping about.
Of course.
And, and he just had the best personality, just a drawing personality, very charismatic. Um, and I hate that those persons took that light out.
Yeah. I want to, before I let you go, I know that your family, with Kevin, your nephew, they do some amazing things for his death anniversary or just anniversaries. Can you talk about that? Because I don't want to miss out on the opportunity of the things that you guys do there.
Yeah. So the first year, not the first year, but uh, on his birthday, the year after, several months after he passed in October. His birthday is in July. In July, following his death,
Mm-hmm.
we had a big cookout, and I mean big cookout, and most of the hood came out for that. And so that has become the norm. Every July 20th is something is done big,
Mm-hmm.
big celebration for him. And this year, um, we were able to get sponsors, and we did free lunch giveaways, free food giveaway on his birthday. And of course, they partied and they had a good time. And they also celebrate his life every year. They go on his birthday. They go and they make his resting place a happy place.
All right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing that. So, I'm going to ask a question and you just fill in the blank for me. Um, Grief is.
Grief is a period of learning who you are and what you can handle.
And grief is not.
Grief is not the end of a memory or life.
Oh, wow. Love that. Love that. Love that. Love the way you stated that. Before I let you go, what has your attention being a leader in your community that you would like to see change or bring further awareness to?
Uh, my biggest thing is when it comes to young Black men, empowering them to be emotionally intelligent and less reactive and be more resilient to change and trauma that may experience in their life so that they can better react and not negative react, but better react and develop the type of interpersonal skills so they can be empowering. And I know I use that word a lot, but that's the only word I can think of.
Hmm.
Self-empowering instead of self-devastating, self-killing, and all of that. I don't know any better words to use. I'm sorry.
No, no, no. That's absolutely perfect. Thank you so much, Dr. Lorenzo Neal, for coming on to It's the Miami Night Show and sharing your journey, sharing the insight, sharing, just the wealth of knowledge that you've been able to provide to my Grief Nation listeners of all the things that you have done to be able to move through this process of grief. So thank you.
Thank you for having me on. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. Well, there you have it, Grief Nation listeners, and thank you for tuning into another transformative segment on It's the Miami Night Show, Grief Talk. Today we give thanks filled with love and gratitude for our special guest, Dr. Lorenzo T. Neal, for expressing your very unique grief journey and sharing ways of understanding the healing process. This is your girl, Miami Night, with much love and light until we connect again spiritually. Bye-bye.
Going slow-mo. He's got me talking that grief talk. Going slow-mo. He's got me clocking it.
It's the Miami Night Show.
Hey, yeah. Slow-mo.
He's got me walking that grief walk.
Going slow-mo.
He's got me talking that grief talk.
Going slow-mo.
He's got me clocking it.
What up, Tribe? It's Miami Night Show, Master Grief Coach. Welcome to the Miami Night Show. He got me walking that grief walk. It's time for Grief Talk, y'all.
I talk about things you think about.
It's Miami Night Show, Master Grief Coach.